Okay, well, inserting into the middle of Dr. Muse's talks here, I was praying a lot and even talked with him how I could insert without breaking the flow here. And I just want to share, especially, I'm glad Uriel's going to be watching me time-wise, something I've learned, especially seems as of late as I'm getting older, but as I do hospice chaplains. And not too long ago, I was with a family where a patient was dying, very actively dying. And there were a lot of questions being thrown at me about life after death, God, and so on and so forth. And I saw that they liked what I was sharing. And suddenly, in me, it elicited a positive response that I started talking more, and then it suddenly hit my brain like something entered in and said, wait a minute, are you now saying more positive things because this is really helpful to them, or because you feel good, that they felt good about what you said? In clergy, we have the temptation to keep talking and talking and talking, and not always question. So I do fall into that, so I'm glad somebody's going to cut me off. I used to have my now 9-year-old, she'd stand in the back of the church during liturgy, and she'd lift up a sign that said 5 minutes. And then she'd actually pull up a sign that said, stop. I was just trying to help you, Dad. Anyway, I want to just share some thoughts here about the Theotokos, and it picks up on this, because I think even among Orthodox, in the pieties that exist, she's misunderstood, or the full weight of what she's about in the Gospels is not always uncovered. And I think this reality that God takes on human reality DNA chromosomes from this young girl, we have a handle on that really reflects that we are organically fused to God. God has organically plugged himself into us through Jesus, but by taking the humanity of the Theotokos into himself. The incarnation to me is a sense that he's established this incredible blood transfusion. The Old Testament, many of us know about the animal sacrifices, and one day somebody asked me what was that supposed to mean? Because there were two reasons you offered sacrifice in the Old Testament. One was for thanksgiving, to be grateful to God for what he has done, blessings you've received, and so on and so forth. But the other reason was for forgiveness of sins. And one of the issues with that is they understood a sin as something that was organically traumatizing to the psyche, to the psyche of the human being, that it wounded you. Now we know in the Old Testament blood symbolized life, and we have to understand in the biblical world that a symbol is what it symbolizes. There was no such thing as saying, well, that's symbolic, as if there's no reality to it. They would have never understood that. That's a very Western European construct. Okay, post-Enlightenment, I'm not going to get into the history. They would have said a symbol is what it symbolizes. Fire symbolizes heat. Fire is hot. Okay, it wasn't separate from the reality, the organic reality. So there was almost a sense that the sacrificing of the animal, the letting of the blood of the animal, was to replace the blood, the life you lost through sin. Sin is something that dehumanizes, depersonalizes us. And ultimately, in the incarnation, what we have is God's own Son, who is everything that God is, coming to become everything that we are. And to literally, in a sense, before this concept ever came about, to do a blood transfusion to burn the spiritual toxins, cancers, poisons out of our system. And that's the incredible reality that God continues through Jesus to take on our human reality. He maintains that bond to our human reality. I love the analogy Dr. Muse made about the woman who had been sexually abused. And the truth that Jesus was also being abused. Because if you look at even if you take the 12, 18 hours of Jesus from the time of the Last Supper ending to the time he's finally entombed, okay, there was some physical suffering, but I think the power of what Jesus is dealing with in Gethsemane is he is realizing he's taking the full weight of this human reality organically into himself. And that's why you read in Mark's Gospel, because people have physically suffered more than Christ did those 15 or so hours that he was suffering. Mark, in his wonderful, simple Greek, talks about when Jesus goes to pray in Gethsemane, he's not just falling on the ground. He is repeatedly throwing himself on the ground. And in the movie The Passion of the Christ, one of my favorite scenes is the whole Gethsemane situation, and that Satan is basically saying to Jesus, can one human being take on the weight of the sin, the brokenness, the evil, the hate, the fear, the rage of the entire world, literally organically into themselves, like somebody who takes in the bacteria of everything? And that the cross is something from the foundation of the world that God breaks through the time-space barrier to invade and make himself present in all of that. Now back to the Theotokos is, I want to share something with this, and I want to talk about the communal aspect of healing, and the communal aspect of approaching all this. The Theotokos was, and we know this, people are who they are coming out of the communities, the families they've been part of, for better or for worse. The people in our lives may draw out of us good things or not so good things. And sometimes the not so good things, we develop what they say in pop psychology, the false self, in order to survive. False self can be arrogant, money-grubbing, very promiscuous. The false self can even be very religious. There is a such thing as religious addiction, religious facades. Religious facades. And there is that temptation. There is that temptation. Now, the flip side is, how do we let that get to the core of who we are, so that, especially for many of us that wear the vestments and do this and that and the other thing, we understand that it's not about us. Like the old proverbial joke that on Palm Sunday, the donkey thought all the accolades and cheering was for him. So when we look at the Theotokos, we look at Joachim and Anna, the family that she was part of, and even the people that came beforehand. I mean, we love to talk about the ancestors of Christ. Many of these people were broken. They were not perfect people by any means, in any way. And a lot of times, even when they repented of their issues and their sins, God didn't necessarily take away the consequences. But the consequences even became a means for their own salvation and to open up salvation for the whole world. Jesus himself in his humanity, because it says, the kenosis in Philippians, he emptied himself, taking on the form of a servant. So when, unlike some other religions where Jesus would be born and literally the next minute he stands up and starts talking. Okay? The full humanity of Jesus really is that. He has to have his diaper changed. He nurses at his mother's womb. He learns to talk from her. The voice she hears, that he hears rather, from her. Who teaches him about his destiny? You're not born like other kids. Who gives him stories? Jesus has a great storytelling knack. Where did he hear stories from? One of my favorite icons is of Jesus taking his first steps as a little kid, and you got the Virgin Mary standing there with her hands outstretched, and he's little and walking up to her. Even Jesus would not be who he is in his humanity without the other people in his life. That's why he's affected when Peter is discouraging. Jesus, in his humanity, encouragement or discouragement affects him. Peter, we know what was shared about that, which is true. And look at the flip side, is when the famous transfiguration story, okay? For those of us who don't realize that heaven and earth, everything overlaps. There's no separation between this dimension and the next, as it were. It's paper thin at best. And in the experience of the transfiguration, where Peter, James, and John go with Jesus to pray, they fall asleep. They seem to do that a lot. And that's a very spiritually real thing, that how much are we asleep and dull to realities that are right in our face. They wake up and they see Jesus so bright. I mean, it's like trying to look into the sun is the impression you get, and maybe you see the outlines of a face or mouth and da-da-da-da. But they recognize Moses and Elijah, who are dead, talking to Jesus. And Luke points out that they are talking to him about what's going to happen in Jerusalem. And an amazing statement after that is, it is after that, quite a few verses down, but right after that, that now it says Jesus now has his face set for Jerusalem. Others, it wasn't a set, maybe? He was still developing, being set in that? Those people encouraged him. The image of the Theotokos is the image of not only every individual Christian. And I love asking people, especially when they do ecumenical Bible study, who's the first Christian? And you'll get Peter, John the Baptist, 3 wise men. It's the Virgin Mary. Why is she the first Christian? Because she's the first one to embrace, allow herself to be seized by the reality of this God that she's in love with, to be literally alive, moving, kicking in her life. And there's many writings in the church that talk about spiritual life and journey being like a pregnancy. And having had 5 children and watching what happens in that, some days are good, some days you have like morning sickness, the box of crackers on the nightstand. Other days you're getting used to it. Then finally you get to the point where you get so large that you need somebody to help you in and out of chairs or get pushed out of bed in the morning or what have you. And then finally when you get to the actual birthing part, it's messy. If somebody's into modesty, they better not ever have a child biologically. And we do. The temptation we have sometimes as Christians is that kind of modesty that we never show. Church is only for good people. For good people. For good people. And that sometimes things are messy, and we don't want our messes pointed out. And it's easy to deflect. And we start using, as one of my professors at seminary said, sometimes cheap pious talk, just saying, rambling and saying spiritual platitudes. Or, on the other negative, we point out everybody else's sins. And I think part of that is that we don't see that life is there. Life is coming in the mess. Life is coming in the midst of what appears to be a mess. Because God is there. Because God is there. God makes humanity out of mud. He doesn't take pure gold, doesn't take diamonds, out of mud. Out of mud. And the idea of being a Christian, therefore, is Christ alive, moving, kicking, growing. A woman, when she's with child, quote unquote, her body transforms. She transforms. Her hormones are going all over the place. There's a change. There's transfiguration, transformation. And St. John of Kronstadt, who died in 1908, one of the things I love he said, among other things he said, was the archangel comes to the Virgin Mary and says, "Rejoice, the Lord is with you." And he means that in the most literal sense, the Lord is with you. Then St. John says, and that's what the archangel wants to say to everyone. The Lord is with you. Rejoice, rejoice. Now the other part of all this is the Theotokos as an image of the church. And and forgive the repetition for many who've heard me, so I'm sorry. You're probably going to feel like my kids do. Dad, you said that story. I had a priest when I was doing graduate work in Greece, who, one day we were sitting and talking, who said to me, any buffoon can mechanically do a liturgy. Any choir, group of chanters, can professionally come across great. But is it the reality that expresses and enhances the reality of Christ being birthed, alive, present, among us, and reaching into the world, through us to the outer world? See, any one of us that has children knows after a while they're on loan, they're not our permanent property, possession, by any stretch. That they're there for something else beyond us, and the Virgin Mary is the great example of that. Her child is destined for something way beyond getting a degree, you know, being a doctor or something like that. And the question becomes is how does the church transform, like the bread and the wine? We talk about the bread and the wine, but all the prayers in Orthodox liturgies talk about us and the gifts you're presented to uncover, become the flesh and blood presence of Jesus.